Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. Let me ask you something that might feel uncomfortably familiar. Have you ever been sitting next to a woman you care about, maybe someone you've been with for years, or maybe someone new who just lit a spark in you, and suddenly, without warning, she pulls away? She stops responding to your texts with the same warmth, her tone gets sharp, the softness in her eyes disappears. She acts like you've done something wrong, but you don't know what. She's not yelling, she's not crying. She's just cold, and in that moment you might tell yourself she's losing interest, or worse, she doesn't care anymore. But I want to offer you something radical. What if her coldness isn't about indifference? What if it's grief, or fear, or even longing? You see, emotional coldness isn't always the absence of feeling. Sometimes it's the presence of too much feeling, feelings that she doesn't feel safe to express. In today's conversation, we're going to talk about the hidden emotions behind a woman's cold behavior. And more importantly, how a grounded, emotionally intelligent man, can learn to see beyond the surface instead of walking away or reacting defensively. Because underneath the silence there is always a story, and it's time we learn how to listen. Have you ever noticed how a woman's coldness can feel like a closed door you weren't even aware you walked toward? One moment things are light, playful even, and then the next she shuts down, her eyes glaze over, her voice sharpens, or worse, it vanishes altogether. And if you're like many men, your first reaction is to fix it, or explain yourself, or retreat. You begin to replay conversations in your head, trying to locate the landmine you must have stepped on. But often the real question isn't what did I do wrong? It's what is she afraid to show? Emotional distance is often misinterpreted as disinterest. But many times coldness is a protective mechanism, not because she doesn't feel, but because she feels too much. She just doesn't know where to put it. I've sat with couples who have spent years in this freeze. And when you peel back the silence, what you often find isn't a lack of love, but layers of pain that never got air. Maybe she was vulnerable before, and it wasn't received. Maybe she spoke her truth, and it got minimized. Maybe she started needing more, and she told herself not to. When a woman begins to act cold, it is rarely the beginning of a feeling. It's often the end of her trying to communicate in ways that felt ignored. She doesn't always shut down because of you. She shuts down because of what she experienced before you. But now you're the safest target to freeze out. She might be hiding sadness, and not just the soft kind. I mean the deep, aching throat, clenching kind, the kind that comes from not feeling chosen, even when she's standing right in front of you. There is a sadness many women carry that no one asks about. They joke through it, perform through it, succeed in spite of it. But emotionally, they're starving, so when she starts to act cold, it's not always anger. It's a way of saying, I don't know how to let you in without losing parts of myself. And let's talk about that for a moment, the parts of herself she's protecting. Because sometimes coldness is not rejection. It's containment. It's a woman trying to hold the parts of herself that once bled too freely, the part that loved without boundaries, the part that stayed too long, the part that forgave too easily. She acts cold now because warmth once betrayed her. This doesn't mean you should chase her through her silence or lose yourself trying to unlock her feelings. But it does mean, before you assume she doesn't care, ask yourself, what would it mean if she actually cared too much? You see, many men were never taught to read emotional temperature the way they read a room. They respond to facts, not moods. To statements, not silences, but relationships live in the space between words. A woman might tell you she's fine, but her body is rigid, her eyes avoid yours, and her voice has no color. You want to believe her words, but your gut feels off. Listen to that, because a woman's coldness is rarely about logic. It's about a shift in energy, and unless you've learned how to feel that, not just hear what she says, but feel what she can't say, you'll always miss the invitation hiding in the withdrawal. But make no mistake, emotional coldness is not a test, it's not a game, it's not manipulation, it is defense. It is fear. It is the result of emotional weight that became too heavy to carry out loud. So when she pulls away, ask yourself, what part of her doesn't feel safe right now? Not safe in the world or with others, but with you, and maybe more importantly with herself. There is a kind of woman who learned to be cold because being warm once cost her everything. She stopped expressing need, she stopped expecting softness, she learned to hold her own hand when no one else showed up. And now that coldness is a habit, but underneath it she is begging to feel safe again. She wants to know if her feelings can land somewhere without being criticized or corrected. She wants to know if her quiet will still be heard. She wants to know if you'll stay, not to fix her, but to feel her. It's not always what you say, it's what your presence says when she stops speaking. That's where we begin. When a woman starts to act cold, she is often hiding the part of herself that hopes you'll notice without her having to ask. So before you pull away, pause, not to pursue her, but to see her, and then ask yourself gently, can I sit in this silence without making it about me? Because in that silence, if you listen closely, you might hear her heart, still beating just buried under the ice. Some women carry their warmth like a secret, tucked deep beneath layers of what looks like indifference. And when she acts cold, it's not because she lacks emotion, but because she doesn't trust what will happen if she shows you how much she still feels. You see, coldness is rarely a woman's natural state. It's almost always a learned response, learned from patterns, from heartbreaks, from watching the way her softness was once used as leverage, or how her truth was once called too much. And so now she plays it cool. Not because she doesn't care, but because she cares more than she wants you to see. There's a quiet kind of panic that can settle inside a woman when she starts to feel emotionally exposed. Her instincts don't say, move closer, they say, protect yourself, and that's when the coldness begins. The distance, the guarded answers, the surface-level conversations that used to run deep. But here's something most men never get taught. A woman's emotional withdrawal is often not punishment, it's a question. Do you see me pulling away? Do you even notice? And if you do, will you move closer? Not with pressure, not with lectures, but with presence. Sometimes she needs you to see her invisible emotions, the ones she's been carrying alone for too long. The ones she doesn't have the words for, or maybe she does, but they've been dismissed so many times she stopped bothering to say them out loud. A woman who is acting cold may, in reality, be a woman fighting to feel connected without losing her dignity. She's trying to hold herself together while secretly wishing someone would come close enough to hold her without needing her to fall apart. This is where emotional maturity comes in. The kind of man who can hold space doesn't rush to defend himself. He doesn't demand explanations. He doesn't try to turn the spotlight back onto his own feelings immediately. He gets curious, he slows down, he pays attention to the space between them, and this kind of presence, it can melt walls without saying a word. But I'll tell you what doesn't help chasing her with fear, or pulling away out of pride. Both are driven by the same wound. If she's not warm with me, I must not matter. And that belief can push men into shutdown mode, into resentment, into rejection. Now you have two people, both hurting, both protecting, both waiting for the other to break the silence first. But when a woman acts cold and you respond with ego instead of empathy, you don't just miss the moment, you deepen the disconnection. Because now her coldness has a reason. You just proved her fears right. Sometimes the best thing you can say is not what's wrong with you. It's I can feel something's shifted. I'm here if you want to talk about it. Simple, direct, without agenda. Because the real invitation is not to solve her, but to stay available, and let me tell you this, women remember that. Not the grand gestures, not the clever replies, but the moment when they were emotionally frozen and someone had the patience to wait beside their silence. She's not looking for a rescuer. She's looking for evidence that it's safe to let her guard down, and for many women that safety has never been modeled. She's been in relationships where vulnerability got punished, where needing closeness made her feel weak, where expressing emotions led to emotional abandonment, not deeper connection. So now, when she starts to feel something real, fear kicks in. And fear for her sounds like, don't be too open, don't be too attached, don't get too close, he might leave. So she leaves first, emotionally at least. But the truth, she's still there, behind the coldness, behind the armor, behind the quiet. And here's what's even more complex. Sometimes her coldness isn't sadness or fear. Sometimes it's shame, shame that she needs more than she thinks she should, shame that she stayed longer than she told her friends she would, shame that she still wants to feel close even when she's hurt, and shame rarely wears its name. It pretends to be independence. It pretends to be strong boundaries. It pretends to be indifference, but it hurts. A woman acting cold might be the loudest way she knows how to say, I don't want to lose myself, but I also don't want to lose you. That tension is real. And if you want to understand her, you have to be willing to hold that paradox, that she can love you and distance herself at the same time. Not because her love is broken, but because her trust in love is still healing. So when she pulls away, try to stop seeing it as rejection. See it as a woman caught between her fear and her desire, between her history and her hope. And when you can recognize that, when you can name what's not being said, that's when something powerful happens. You stop trying to fix her, and you start offering her the one thing she's been silently craving. And sometimes the safety she craves doesn't come from your words at all. It comes from what you don't do. You don't get angry when she's quiet. You don't mock her when she needs space. You don't pressure her to open up before she's ready. And most importantly, you don't take her coldness as proof that she has no feelings. Because the irony is, the colder she acts, the more emotionally alive she usually is. It's just that the feelings are too overwhelming, too tangled, too layered with disappointment, with past betrayals, with everything she never got to say before she had to pretend she didn't care anymore. And maybe she's testing something, not in a manipulative way, but in a deeply human way. She's asking, can I trust you with the parts of me I don't even like about myself? She's asking, if I act like I don't need anyone, will you still be there anyway? These questions are ancient. They live beneath the surface of so many relationships, and most of the time no one says them out loud. But they are felt in the pauses, in the late-night distance, in the moments when she pulls away and hopes you'll lean in, not because she needs saving, but because she needs witnessing. She wants to be seen, not just the polished, well-behaved, loving version of her, but the complicated, moody, messy one too. And for that, she's not looking for a hero. She's looking for a man who can handle contradiction, who can hold complexity without collapsing, who can feel her chill and not flinch, because he knows warmth doesn't always announce itself with ease. You don't melt a woman's walls by tearing them down. You melt them by making her feel like she never needed them in the first place. And that doesn't happen overnight. A woman who acts cold isn't testing how strong you are. She's testing how safe you are. Will you hold your ground when she seems emotionally absent? Will you respect her silence but not retreat into your own? Will you sit beside her, emotionally uninvited, but spiritually attuned, because you know, deep down, that silence is not rejection, it's hesitation. And hesitation often comes from grief. There are women walking through relationships with grief that has no language. Grief for the affection they never received from a parent. Grief for the way they gave their love to someone who didn't know what to do with it. Grief for the version of themselves that always kept things easy, so no one would leave, and now, when they finally find someone who might stay, they panic. Not because they don't want closeness, but because they don't yet know who they are when someone offers it willingly. You may think you're being punished when she acts cold, but really, you might be standing next to a woman who is doing emotional algebra in her mind. She's calculating whether it's finally safe to be soft, or if this is just another moment where being open will cost her too much. So she distances, she gets short, she changes the subject, she tells you she's tired when what she really is emotionally raw. And this is where many men misstep. They push, they demand answers, or they say something like, "You're being distant, just admit it." But that's not how safety is built. Safety is built in the moments when you don't force the conversation, but you make it known that you're still there, that you're not confused by her silence because you understand it's not the absence of love, it's the fear of letting it come out too fast. I've watched relationships break not because of betrayal or conflict, but because two people didn't know how to sit in emotional uncertainty together. And so they turned away, not out of hatred, but out of fear, not because they didn't love, but because love without emotional literacy can feel like a storm without shelter. So let's change that. If you love a woman who sometimes acts cold, learn to read her emotional weather. You don't need to be perfect, you don't need to always get it right, but you do need to care enough to notice when her body is speaking a different truth than her words. And in those moments, your calm, your grounded energy, your patience becomes a sanctuary, not because you rescued her, but because you stayed with her confusion long enough for her to find her words. Sometimes a woman's silence isn't the end of a conversation. It's just the beginning, spoken in a language she's still learning how to trust again. And once she does begin to trust again, you'll see it. Not all at once, not in fireworks, but in quiet, subtle ways. She'll soften her voice when she says your name. She'll linger longer at the door when saying goodbye. She'll ask you how you slept, not because she needs to know, but because she wants to know. This is her way of peeking out from under the armor. It's not performative. It's not loud, but it is real. And it's fragile, because to a woman who has grown used to being her own shelter, letting someone else in feels like surrender. Not a surrender of power, but a surrender of protection. And when she acts cold again, don't panic. Don't take it as a step backwards. Think of it as her nervous system testing the ground beneath her. Making sure it won't collapse, making sure you won't collapse. You are being studied whether you realize it or not. Not in a manipulative way, but in the most human way. She's watching for consistency, for steadiness, for truth, not the truth you speak with words, but the truth you live with your energy. When she pulls away, she's watching. Will you respect her space or try to invade it? Will you stay emotionally attuned or check out completely? Will you punish her with distance or hold the door open quietly, patiently, without needing recognition? Because the moment you make her coldness about your ego, you stop being a safe place, and this is important. Many men confuse being safe with being passive. That's not what she needs. She doesn't want a man who tolerates everything just to keep the peace. She doesn't want someone who avoids conflict or tiptoes around truth. She wants presence, but with strength. She wants patience, but with awareness. She wants softness, but with a backbone, because here's the paradox. A woman who acts cold doesn't want a man who bends for her. She wants a man who stands firm with her, a man who doesn't need to control her emotions, but also doesn't abandon his own. There is nothing more attractive, more healing, than a man who can hold tension without trying to erase it. You might think you're losing her when she becomes distant, but often she is watching to see if you'll stay connected even in the absence of ease. Will you lean in emotionally, not physically? Will you stay curious without demanding answers? Will you offer warmth even when it isn't immediately returned? And if you can, that's where the transformation begins, because here's what most people don't realize. Coldness is not the opposite of love. Indifference is, but when she acts cold, you can feel something underneath it, a pulse, a tightness. A breath being held, that means something is alive in her. Something is still asking to be met. Your job is not to force that door open. It's to sit beside it, gently, repeatedly, so that over time she learns you don't leave when things get quiet. You don't shame her when things get complicated. You don't need constant access to her feelings in order to feel secure in your own. And when she sees that, when she feels it, not just once but over time, the ice begins to melt. But melting takes time. It takes warmth. It takes your ability to handle silence like a man who knows his own worth. Because when you stay regulated in the face of her dysregulation, when you stay grounded in the face of her retreat, you give her something no one else has ever given her, permission to trust her own heart again, and that's the kind of intimacy she'll never forget, not because it was dramatic, but because it was stable. Because it was kind, because it didn't flinch. When you learn how to hear what she doesn't say, when you learn how to feel what she's afraid to feel herself, you become more than a partner. You become a mirror for the parts of her that forgot they were lovable, and once she starts to believe that her emotions are not liabilities but invitations, something begins to shift. Her body relaxes, her laughter returns, her eyes stay on you longer than before. And maybe for the first time in a long time, she no longer feels like she has to choose between being loved and being honest. This is the emotional tipping point in many relationships, when a woman realizes, I can stay soft and still be safe. But that softness, it doesn't just happen because you waited long enough. It happens because you witnessed her, not just the version she offers the world, but the version that hides beneath the stillness, beneath the distance, beneath the cold. And she might not say it. She might never look at you and say, "Thank you for holding space for me when I didn't know how to be held." But she'll remember it in the way she lets you in, deeper and deeper, with less hesitation each time. Because emotional safety rewires the heart, and maybe now you understand something you didn't before. Her coldness wasn't rejection. It was risk. It was her body's attempt to protect her soul. And now, because you didn't rush her, didn't shame her, didn't abandon her, that risk begins to feel like a relationship worth trusting. You didn't chase her feelings. You didn't try to melt the ice by force. You just stayed still, warm, present, and in doing so, you taught her something most people never do, that love can be quiet, slow, and steady and still be real. Now, the woman who once distanced herself when emotions ran high might start to come closer, not with declarations, not with dramatic gestures, but with intimacy so subtle you'll have to pay attention to catch it. She'll send you the song that's been stuck in her head. She'll open up about something small that no one else would have noticed. She'll sit a little closer without saying a word. That's how trust shows up in her world, not loud. Not linear, but layered and slow, like a sunrise that doesn't ask for applause. It just shows up, day after day, until you finally notice how much warmer the room has become. And this warmth, the kind you built by not turning her coldness against her, it does something sacred. It invites her to feel again, to connect, to let her feminine heart breathe again in a world that asked her to suppress it for far too long. But let me be clear, this doesn't mean she'll never withdraw again. Emotional healing isn't a straight line. She may still get quiet when things overwhelm her. She may still protect her heart when something feels uncertain. But now she has a memory, a reference point. She remembers what it felt like to open and not be judged, To be quiet and still feel loved, to act cold and not be abandoned, that memory is powerful because it becomes her new standard. And more than that, it becomes the space where real intimacy lives. Not intimacy that's based on constant closeness, but intimacy that's based on emotional freedom, where she's not punished for pulling back, and you're not afraid of the space. Because that's the difference between a fragile man and a grounded one. A fragile man demands constant emotional proof. He panics when she needs space. He takes her coldness personally, but a grounded man, he knows that love is not a performance. And connection isn't always loud. It's often in the pauses, the silences, the subtleties, and in those moments he doesn't collapse. He holds himself, the moment, the woman, all of it without needing to rush, fix, or flee. That is strength. That is intimacy. That is emotional leadership. So if you're with a woman who sometimes acts cold, don't ask yourself how to fix her. Ask yourself, am I the kind of man who can hold her without needing her to make me feel safe? Because when you can answer yes to that, not just in words, but in presence, you're not just loving her. You're healing the part of her that thought she had to go through life emotionally alone, and that, my friend, is unforgettable. And so now, if she acts cold again, you won't see her as distant. You'll see her as guarded, and there's a difference. Distant says, I'm done. Guarded says, I'm afraid to begin. She is not frozen. She is paused. She is not unfeeling. She is untrusting, and sometimes the most courageous thing she can do is nothing at all, because that nothing, that silence, that withdrawn energy you feel, it's not emptiness. It's full, brimming with unsaid emotions. With stories she doesn't know if she's ready to tell, with versions of herself she doesn't know if you'll understand. And in that moment she's not looking for a fix, she's not waiting for a magic phrase, she's watching. Listening, feeling, she wants to know if you are a man who can hold space not just for her joy, but for her contradictions. Her tension, her moods, her not knowing, because any man can love a woman when she's easy to love. But the man she will trust with her heart is the one who can love her in silence, who can feel her even when she says nothing, who can wait beside her coldness with warmth, not to melt her, but to remind her she doesn't have to freeze any more. And that's the thing we often miss about love. It's not in the grand gestures. It's not in the perfectly timed texts or the passionate speeches. Real love shows up quietly. It looks like a man sitting across from a woman who's shut down, and instead of walking away, he leans in not to invade, but to offer presence. It sounds like, I don't know what you're feeling right now, but I'm here. It feels like the comfort of not needing to perform, or explain, or defend. That's where intimacy is born, not in the heat of passion, but in the quiet of emotional uncertainty. So if you're watching this right now, wondering why the woman in your life suddenly pulled away, remember this. Her coldness is not your enemy. It's her last attempt to protect something tender, and your response in that moment will teach her something about herself. That maybe she can be loved in her complexity. That maybe she doesn't have to be warm to be worthy. That maybe the man in front of her sees her, really sees her, not just for who she's been, but for who she's afraid to become. And if you can be that man, if you can love her without needing her to melt on your timeline, if you can hold her in her stillness, you won't just win her heart. You'll be part of her healing, and that is the most intimate thing you can ever give to someone. So the next time she acts cold, don't pull away. Don't react, just pause, breathe, and then let your presence say what words never could. I see you. I'm not going anywhere, because sometimes that's all it takes. Thank you for being here with me in the Intimacy Lab. If this touched something in you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you've ever loved someone who acted cold but underneath was crying out for connection, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join this growing space of emotional maturity. human connection, and radical intimacy. Here's to loving better, here's to listening deeper, here's to staying when staying matters most. I'll see you soon,